Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into the story of Naruto, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled beneath wide, whispering trees and gentle, sunlit skies, a boy was born to silence. The night he arrived, the world trembled. A great beast with eyes like fire and a tail that split the wind tore through the hidden leaf village. The nine-tailed fox, a creature of fury and flame, crashed its claws through rooftops and dreams. Buildings fell, lanterns dimmed, mothers clutched children, and shinobi rushed into battle, their hearts pounding with fear. Amidst the chaos, a sacrifice was made. Two young parents, strong, brave, and full of love, sealed the beast within their own child. A tiny infant wrapped in swaddling cloth, barely breathing, unaware of the world he had just entered. That child was Naruto Uzumaki. But the village didn't see him as a boy. They saw the beast. Years passed, slowly, quietly. While other children were welcomed with warm hands and gentle smiles, Naruto grew up in the corners of the village, a silent shadow at the edge of every street. He lived alone in a small apartment. The walls were bare, the floor creaked. His mornings were empty, and his nights were long. He cooked his own meals, washed his own clothes, and learned to laugh by himself. There were no bedtime stories, no goodnight hugs, no name whispered with affection. Only silence. Sometimes he wandered the streets late into the evening, watching the flicker of shop lights and the glow of paper lanterns hanging above noodle stalls. Families sat together, sharing bowls of steaming ramen, their laughter warm and soft like falling leaves. Naruto would watch them from a distance, his hands in his pockets, his eyes wide with something he didn't yet understand, a longing dot. At the playground, he sat alone on a swing that creaked gently in the wind. The other children played nearby, their parents calling to them with affection. But no one called Naruto. And still, he smiled. A bright, crooked, stubborn little smile, as if he could carve happiness from stone. He painted graffiti on the Hokage's statues, not to cause trouble, but to be seen. To remind the village, "I'm here too." He shouted, he joked. He acted out, But in truth, he just didn't want to be invisible anymore. Sometimes late at night, he would walk to the old training field and stare at the stars, the grass, cool beneath his feet, the sky stretching endlessly above. The wind would rustle the trees, whispering things he couldn't quite hear. He would lie back, arms behind his head, and wonder, who were my parents? Why does nobody like me? What did I do wrong? But the stars offered no answers. Only a soft glow, only silence. And yet, within that silence, something stirred, something small, something warm, hope. Even when he was rejected, Naruto never gave up. He kept trying to make people smile. He trained harder than anyone. He failed and failed again, and still returned the next morning, bruised, hungry, sleepy, ready to try once more. There was a gentleness in him, a softness hidden beneath all the loud bravado and messy and pranks. A boy who carried the weight of an entire village's fear and still managed to dream. He dreamed of becoming Hokage, not just the strongest ninja, but someone the whole village would look at with pride, someone they would finally accept. In his small room, he kept a cracked photo of the previous Hokage. He didn't know that one of them was his father, but even then he looked up to them, these men carved into stone, their faces watching over the village like silent guardians. He thought, one day I'll be up there too, you'll see. And perhaps even the stone would smile back. In the academy, Naruto wasn't the brightest student. He struggled with even the simplest techniques. Shadow clones dissolved into smoke. His transformations were clumsy. Teachers sighed. Classmates laughed. But Naruto laughed too. Loud, exaggerated, and always just a little too long, as if trying to drown out the echo of something else. He wore orange, not because it was subtle, but because it was loud, bold, hard to miss. I won't be ignored, his color seemed to shout. I exist. It was a storm in a quiet classroom, scribbling nonsense during lectures, snacking loudly, bouncing in his seat, drawing doodles in the margins of his textbooks. The other students kept their distance. They didn't understand why he acted the way he did. Most didn't even try to. But one teacher saw him. Iruka-sensei. At first, Iruka only saw the troublemaker, the boy who disrupted lessons, disobeyed rules, and turned every serious moment into a joke. But slowly, gently, the truth began to surface, like light rising through water. Iruka, too, had grown up without parents. He, too, had once felt that hollow ache of being left behind. And in Naruto, he recognized the same loneliness hidden behind noise and bravado. One day, after another failed attempt at the clone jutsu, Naruto sat alone on the rooftop of the Kurum's Academy. The sky was a dusty orange, clouds drifting slowly above like thoughts with no place to go. His feet dangled over the edge. His head hung low. No one had clapped for him. No one had cheered. He had failed again. Iruka found him there not to scold, not to lecture, but to sit beside him, quietly, patiently, without asking for anything. For a long while, neither spoke. The wind whistled softly through the trees. A few birds passed overhead. Somewhere in the village below, the smell of grilled dumplings wafted up from a tiny food stall. And then Iruka said gently, "You remind me of myself." Naruto turned, surprised. "I used to think no one saw me either," Iruka continued. "That I didn't matter, that I wasn't enough. But I was wrong. I just hadn't met the right people yet." Naruto looked at him, the usual fire in his eyes replaced with something softer. A quiet question. He didn't know how to ask. "You're not alone," Iruka said, "even if it feels like it." Those words settled into Naruto's heart like falling snow, soft, cold, and impossibly beautiful. Something he didn't know he needed until he heard it. Later that evening, Iruka took him out for ramen, piping hot, with soft-boiled eggs and slices of pork, steam rising like dreams in winter. Naruto devoured the bowl with wide eyes and an open heart. That moment stayed with him. Not because of the food, but because someone had chosen to sit across from him. Someone had listened. Someone had stayed. For Naruto, who had spent his life watching families from a distance, it was the first time he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could belong too. He began to show up to class a little earlier, tried a little harder, smiled a little softer. He still failed, often. But now, when he fell, someone was there to help him up. In the quiet spaces between lessons and laughter, something began to grow, not strength, not skill, but belief. Belief that he could be more than the village's burden, more than a vessel, more than the boy no one looked at. He could be Naruto. And for the first time, that felt like it might be enough. Days turned into seasons. The leaves in the Hidden Leaf Village shifted colors from lush spring green to the rustling golds of autumn. Time passed in whispers, and Naruto kept walking forward. Always forward, Dot. Even when the path was uneven, even when his footsteps echoed with no one beside him. There were moments when the silence was heavier than usual. Like when he returned to his small apartment after a long day, the door creaking softly, the light switch clicking on to reveal the same bare walls and folded futon, the same quiet kettle boiling water for instant noodles, the same cracked window through which the village lights blinked like distant stars. In those moments, Naruto would sometimes sit by the windowsill, knees to his chest, chin resting on folded arms, and watch. Watch as families walked past. Watch as candles were lit. Watch as laughter floated from balconies. And then he would smile, a tired, tender smile. The kind of smile only someone deeply unfamiliar with loneliness can wear, not bitter, not broken, but soft, like a child who still dares to dream. Because even when no one believed in him, he did. He believed that he could change things, that someday he would become Hokage. Not just for the title, not for the power, but so that no one would ever ignore him again. So that when he walked through the village, people would smile at him the way they smiled at others. So that the empty space beside him would finally feel full. Sometimes he would climb the tallest hill overlooking the Hokage monument, the carved faces of the village's past leaders watching silently over the world below. He would sit there, legs dangling over the stone edge, and whisper softly to the wind, "One day, I'll be up there too, I promise." And the wind, gentle and warm, would brush through his golden hair as if replying, "I know." There were nights when dreams came to him, soft, flickering scenes in his sleep. He'd see himself as Hokage, wearing the robe, standing tall in front of a cheering village, confetti in the air, children pointing and smiling, Iruka clapping, the third Hokage nodding with pride. But even in his dreams, there was always one empty spot in the crowd, a face he had never seen but often imagined, a woman with kind eyes, a man with spiky hair and a warm voice. His parents. He didn't know their names, didn't know their story, only felt somewhere deep inside that they had loved him, Dot, and perhaps were watching still. In moments of frustration when the training scrolls wouldn't make sense, or when another jutsu ended in smoke and disappointment, Naruto would lie on his back and stare at the ceiling. He wouldn't cry, not anymore, but his heart would ache quietly like a bruise under the skin. And then, like a ritual, he would whisper to himself, "I won't give up, no matter what. Believe it." Not because someone else told him to, but because he had to tell himself. He had no one to lean on. So he became his own support, his own light in the dark. And yet, that light never dimmed. Even when the villagers turned their backs, even when the world seemed too heavy, even when he was just a boy, too small for the weight he carried. Naruto still believed, not in fate, but in his own feet, in walking forward, step by quiet step. There was a day, cloudy and still, when Naruto failed the academy graduation exam for the third time. He stood outside the classroom, his forehead low, hands curled into fists by his sides. Behind the door, whispers floated. Some pitied him, others laughed. But no one came to him. He walked away slowly, past the school gates, past the training posts, past the villagers who still turned their eyes when he passed. His steps were heavy that evening, not from exhaustion, but from the quiet weight of disappointment. Again, he had tried. And again, it hadn't been enough. The sky grew darker. He climbed the same hill he always did, the one where the wind moved gently through the trees, and the world below looked peaceful, even if his heart wasn't. He sat on the grass, pulling, his knees close, watching the clouds drift past. He wondered for a moment if dreams really ever came true. If people like him, people born alone, marked by fear, avoided by the very place they called home, could ever become something more. A gust of wind brushed against his cheek. Somewhere below, wind chimes sang softly, and in that quiet, something stirred inside him. Not anger, not sadness, but a memory. Iruka's words. "You're not alone." They echoed like a soft bell in his chest. Later that night, a dangerous betrayal unfolded. The teacher, a scroll, and Naruto caught in something far bigger than he understood. He had been tricked, lied to, hunted. But when Iruka found him bleeding, panting and trembling under the moonlight, Naruto saw something in his eyes he had never seen before from anyone. Pride. Not fear, not pity, but real, trembling pride. Iruka threw himself in front of Naruto, shielding him from harm, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, something warmer than fire and stronger than stone. "You saved me," Iruka whispered afterward. "You're not just a burden. You're not just some Jinchuriki. You're Naruto Uzumaki, and I believe in you." Naruto blinked, as if those words were a language he was hearing for the very first time. He didn't cry, but in his heart, something cracked open, and from inside, something beautiful began to rise. The next morning, Iruka placed a forehead protector in Naruto's palm. Not out of pity, but because Naruto had earned it. He was a ninja now, not in name, but in spirit. He walked home that morning with the sky blushing above him. The village still looked the same. Shops opening, children running past, rooftops stretching into the distance. But to Naruto, everything had changed. Because now he wasn't walking through the world unseen. He had a name, a protector, a purpose, and just maybe a place. He stopped by the ramen shop on his way home. Ichiraku's. The old man behind the counter gave him a wave, the kind that said, "Welcome back." Naruto smiled, wide and unfiltered. He sat at the counter and ordered his usual extra: noodles, extra egg, extra warmth. The steam curled up in soft spirals, the smell comforting and rich. And for the first time in a very long while, Naruto wasn't just eating to fill an empty belly. He was celebrating. His journey hadn't truly begun yet. There were mountains to climb, fights to survive, friends to meet, and losses to grieve. But in that quiet moment, with the soup warm against his hands and the village beginning to stir with morning light, he felt something new. Not hope, not yet, but peace. A soft, fleeting peace, like a lullaby at the end of a long, stormy night. And in the silence of that morning, a promise formed quietly in his heart. "I will keep going. I will become someone they can be proud of. I will become Hokage, not to be loved, but because I loved this place, even when it didn't love me back." The boy who was left behind was beginning to move forward. And with each gentle step, the world shifted just a little, like the first light of dawn rising over old stone faces, like a quiet heart, finally being heard. In a village filled with ancient traditions and guarded hearts, there lived a man who carried his own quiet sorrow. His name was Iruka Umino. By day, he was a teacher at the Ninja Academy, guiding young minds, correcting posture, explaining chakra flow with chalk in hand and soft reprimands. To most, he was ordinary. Another face among the village's mad. But beneath his patient voice and tired smile was a heart that had once been torn in two. Iruka had lost his parents during the Nine-Tails attack on the Hidden Leaf. He had been just a boy small, frightened, and suddenly alone. The warmth of home had vanished in a single night, replaced by the cold silence of empty rooms and unanswered questions. For a long time, he didn't understand what had happened. He only knew that the world, no longer held the softness it once did. And yet, he grew. He studied. He trained. He became a shinobi not because he sought glory, but because he needed a reason to keep moving, to wake up, to belong. And eventually he became a teacher. He stood each morning before rows of children, all chattering and laughing, their heads full of dreams, and tried to give them the tools to protect themselves, to grow, to live longer than their parents might have. But among them was one boy who reminded him of something he had buried deep, a boy who sat alone, a boy who acted out, a boy whose smile was too big, and whose eyes, if one looked closely, carried a quiet plea. Naruto Uzumaki. At first, Iruka felt only discomfort. The boy was loud, disruptive, impossible to control. He didn't follow rules. He didn't listen. He didn't care what anyone thought. But then, one afternoon, something changed, that it was a rainy day. The classroom windows wept quietly, and the students had gone home early. Iruka remained behind, sorting through test papers. He noticed Naruto's barely filled, messy handwriting, drawings in the margins, but scrawled across the top in bold letters were the words, "I'm gonna be Hokage!" 3 exclamation marks, as if he had shouted it through his pen. Iruka held the paper for a long while, and something stirred inside him. That evening, as he walked home beneath his umbrella, he thought about Naruto, about the villagers who whispered when the boy passed, about the way doors closed behind him, how children were pulled away, how the air grew stiff whenever he was near. He remembered that feeling. The feeling of walking through a world that didn't want to see you. The way silence could become a wall. How it felt to be 12 years old and utterly untouchable. And for the first time, Iruka didn't see a disruptive student. He saw a boy who was hurting. A boy who just wanted to be noticed. The next day, he tried something different. Instead of scolding Naruto for arriving late, he greeted him gently. Instead of punishing him for doodling on his desk, he asked what he had drawn. The boy looked startled, suspicious, as if unsure whether this was a trick. But slowly, something softened in his eyes. Iruka began to notice things. How Naruto looked around the room before laughing to see if anyone would join him. How he always sat near the window, his gaze drifting outward more than inward. How he brought lunch, but never ate it all, as if he was saving some for someone who never arrived. The more Iruka watched, the more he understood. Naruto didn't misbehave to be cruel. He acted out to be seen. In a world that looked away, one heart quietly turned toward him. Naruto began to notice it too, this quiet shift, this gentle change in the way Iruka looked at him. He wasn't being shouted at as much. There was patience in Iruka's voice now, sometimes even warmth. And though Naruto didn't quite understand why, something in his chest loosened. He began staying back after class. Not because he had detention, but because Iruka would ask him to help gather scrolls or organize practice kunai, or simply sit and talk. At first, the conversations were clumsy, awkward, filled with long pauses and Naruto's exaggerated laughter trying to cover the silence. But Iruka didn't push. He would smile softly, offer a warm drink or a small snack, and let the stillness rest between them like a blanket. Naruto had never known silence could be so kind. One day, Iruka asked, "Why do you want to become Hokage?" Naruto looked up from the practice scroll he had been flipping through. His voice, for once, didn't shout. It didn't echo. It came out like a secret. "So people won't ignore me anymore." Iruka didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly, deeply as if the words had reached a place he hadn't opened in years. Later that evening, he wrote Naruto's name on the board for the next week's special training session, something normally reserved for the most promising students. And though Naruto stumbled through most of the drills, tripped on his own feet, and misfired a smoke bomb into a tree stump, Iruka still clapped for him. And Naruto beamed. Not because he had succeeded, but because someone had cared. That night, Naruto returned home and tried to draw a face. It was lopsided and messy lines, wobbled, the nose was crooked, but the smile was unmistakable. It was Iruka. He taped the picture to his wall right above his futon. And for the first time, he fell asleep looking at someone who had stayed Dot. From that day on, Iruka became more than just a teacher. He became a safe place. When Naruto struggled with jutsu forms, Iruka would gently correct his hand seals. When the class laughed at Naruto's failed transformation, Iruka would raise an eyebrow and say, "At least he tried." When Naruto forgot his lunch, which was often, Iruka would split his own, sliding half fine across the table without a word. Naruto never said thank you. Not out loud. But in the way, he began to try harder. It showed. He started waking up earlier, arriving to class before the others. His notes, once just doodles, and scribbles began to fill with clumsy but genuine effort. He listened more. He laughed less, loudly but more freely. And when he smiled, it reached his eyes. Iruka noticed. He noticed how the boy who once screamed to be seen was now learning to sit quietly, not because he had shrunk, but because he finally felt visible. Sometimes Iruka would catch Naruto watching the Hokage monument from the classroom window, his gaze soft, focused. And he understood that look. It was the same one he had carried years ago, the look of someone trying to measure their pain against something greater, someone wondering if they too could become more than what the world had decided they were. On the morning of the next academy evaluation, Iruka found a note left on his desk folded, unevenly, written in Naruto's blocky handwriting. It read, "I'll do better this time. You'll see." No name, no signature. But Iruka smiled anyway, because he already knew who it was from. But the world doesn't change all at once. It turns slowly, like leaves changing color before the fall, that even as Iruka's heart softened. The rest of the village stayed cold. There were whispers in alleyways, disapproving glances in markets, doors that stayed closed when Naruto passed by. No one said it aloud, but everyone remembered what was sealed inside him, and Naruto could feel it. Even if he didn't understand why, even if no one told him the truth, he could feel the distance, the way people flinched, the way they looked past him, like he wasn't really there. It hurt, even when he smiled, even when he told himself it didn't matter. The loneliness would sneak back in, not as a storm, but as a quiet drizzle that soaked through his sleeves and reached his bones. One evening, long after classes had ended, Naruto was found on the roof of the academy, alone in the dark, curled up beside the training dummies. Iruka was locking up when he saw the small shape under the faint moonlight. He climbed up silently and sat down beside the boy without a word. For a long while they said nothing. Only the wind spoke, brushing gently through their hair, tugging at the edges of Naruto's too-big jacket. Then in a voice smaller than Iruka had ever heard from him, Naruto whispered, "Why does everyone hate me?" Iruka didn't answer right away. He looked up at the stars, remembering a younger version of himself asking that same question. In that same village, under that same sky, he could have told him the truth. About the 9-dash tales dot about the past. About fear and grief and how people sometimes carry pain they don't understand. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "They're wrong about you." Naruto turned to him, eyes wide. "You're not what they think," Iruka said. "You're not a monster. You're not a mistake. You're just a kid, trying his best. And that's more than enough." Naruto blinked. His mouth trembled, but he didn't cry. He simply nodded once, slowly as if taking the words and folding them deep into the center of his chest. They sat together until the wind turned colder. Then Iruka walked him home, one quiet step at a time. That night, Naruto fell asleep without dreams, but with Iruka's voice still echoing softly in the back of his mind. "You're enough." But peace doesn't always last. Soon after, the graduation exam returned, and with it, disappointment. Naruto failed again. And this time he didn't go to the roof. He didn't smile or shout or demand a second chance. He simply walked away. Iruka watched him leave the academy with slumped shoulders and dragging steps. Something about that silence felt heavier than any outburst. That evening, when Naruto didn't return to class or home, concern became alarm. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind the mountains. And still, Naruto was missing. Iruka searched the streets, the rooftops, the training grounds, until he found him, deep in the forest, breathless, dirt on his face, scroll clutched in trembling hands. He had been tricked, used by a traitor to steal a powerful, forbidden jutsu. Naruto didn't know what he had done, only that someone had finally offered him a shortcut to being seen, to becoming great. But now he was surrounded, caught, blamed, and afraid. Iruka stepped forward, not with accusation, but with love. He placed himself between Naruto and danger, just as he once wished someone had done for him. "You're not him," Iruka said, facing the man who had betrayed them. "He's not the demon. I am his teacher, and I trust him." Naruto heard those words like a thunderclap in his soul. No one had ever stood for him before. No one had ever said they trusted him. And when the danger passed and the forest grew still again, Naruto stood trembling in front of Iruka, tears threatening, voice caught in his throat. Iruka smiled gently and untied the protector from his own forehead. "You've earned this," he said. Then, without ceremony, he wrapped the headband around Naruto's brow, the metal cool against his skin, the symbol of the leaf pressed against the warmth of his forehead. Naruto reached up to touch it. His hand shook. I did it," he whispered. Iruka nodded. "Yes, Naruto, you really did." And under that moonlit canopy, for the first time in his life, Naruto believed he was finally becoming someone dot. The next morning, the hidden leaf was quiet. Mist floated between rooftops. Sparrows stretched their wings along telephone wires. Shopkeepers swept their doorsteps, unaware that something had quietly changed in the heart of the village. Naruto walked through the streets with the forehead protector shining gently against his brow. His steps were still light, still clumsy, but there was a calm in his stride now, a small, glowing ember where once there had only been hunger. He didn't look back. He didn't need to, because for the first time in his life, someone had stood beside him and had not left. Later that day, Iruka took him out to Ichiraku Ramen. Naruto sat at the counter with wide eyes, legs swinging beneath the stool, unable to stop, grinning. It wasn't just the ramen, though. It was hot and rich and perfect. It was the quiet way Iruka sat beside him, bowl in hand, as if this moment were the most normal, most natural thing in the world. No lectures, no corrections, no loneliness. Just two people sharing a meal. Just warmth. The steam curled gently upward, and Naruto watched it dance in the air like a dream made visible. He turned to Iruka, his voice soft. "Sensei, why do you care about me?" Iruka paused, chopsticks still in hand. Then he smiled a smile touched with something deep and honest. "Because I know what it's like to be alone," he said. "And I know what it's like when someone chooses not to leave." Naruto looked down at his bowl. His throat ached, not from sadness, but from something fuller, something rounder, like belonging. He didn't reply. He didn't need to dot. The silence between them had become something beautiful. From that day onward, Iruka was no longer just a teacher. He was the first thread in Naruto's tapestry, the first proof that the world could turn toward him instead of away. That kindness didn't have to come with conditions. That love could begin with something as simple as sharing a meal in the quiet. Over time, Naruto would grow. He would meet others who shaped his heart: Kakashi, Sakura, Jiraiya, Hinata. He would travel far beyond the walls of Konoha, face enemies, lose friends, carry burdens no child should ever know. But somewhere deep in the folds of his soul, Iruka's presence remained, like a gentle voice in a storm, like a soft hand on his shoulder, like a single, unwavering truth: you are not alone. Even years later, long after Naruto had achieved the impossible, after he had walked through fire and shadow, after he had fulfilled every promise to the boy he once was, Iruka still sat beside him at Ichiraku from time to time, still quiet, still smiling, still choosing him. Because some bonds never fray. Some hearts, once open, stay open forever. And some love begins not with loud declarations, but with a whisper on a rainy evening in the quiet space between a teacher and a boy who had been waiting his whole life to be seen. Naruto had always known what it felt like to be alone. He had walked through empty alleys with hands in his pockets, sat on swings where no one pushed him, laughed loudly in crowded streets where no one laughed back. For so long, silence had been his only company. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that curled up beside him like a cold wind, whispering, "You don't belong." But one day, something changed. Not with a fanfare, not with dramatic music or bold declarations. It began with a simple sheet of paper, a mission assignment, and 3 names written side by side. Team 7. Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura. They were to train together, learn together, and complete missions under a new sensei, Hatake Kakashi. A team, a unit. Naruto stared at the page, blinking. 3 names, including his. He read it again, and again. Not alone. He didn't know how to feel. He had always imagined friendship as something bright and instant, like switching on a light. But what came next was different. Awkward, messy, real. Sakura didn't like him. Not really. She rolled her eyes when he spoke too loud, sighed when he made mistakes, and always turned her attention towards the boy who never smiled. Sasuke, the last of the Uchiha. He was everything Naruto wasn't: calm, quiet, cool. He spoke little, moved like shadow, and carried an ache that stayed behind his eyes. The village respected him. Girls admired him. Teachers praised him. And Naruto envied him. But even envy, when shared long enough, begins to change shape. Their first meeting with Kakashi was strange. He arrived late, long after the sun had risen. His mask covered most of his face. His posture was relaxed, almost lazy, but his eyes were sharp, calm, and unreadable. He asked them to introduce themselves. Naruto spoke first, loud, eager hands waving in the air. "I'm gonna be Hokage. Believe it!" Sakura followed, shy, graceful, her voice trembling just slightly as she glanced at Sasuke. And Sasuke simply said his name, his dream of revenge, and nothing more. Kakashi didn't react. He only nodded, then told them their first real test would begin the next day. And so it did. The bell test. 2 tiny bells. One goal: take them from Kakashi. Naruto charged in first, reckless, determined, shouting. But within seconds he was flat on the ground, nose in the dirt, ropes wrapped around his body. Kakashi hadn't even moved much, just a flicker of motion, a puff of smoke. Sasuke tried next, calm, precise, strategic. He fared better, but still failed. Sakura barely engaged at all, paralyzed by fear, unsure how to move. And by noon, all 3 of them sat in the grass, exhausted, empty-handed, and humiliated. But then Kakashi said something strange. "You don't pass this test by fighting me," he said softly. "You pass it by learning to work as a team." They blinked, confused. Kakashi looked at them, the breeze lifting the corners of his flak jacket. "Those who break the rules are scum," he said. "But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum." The words landed with quiet weight. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between the 3 of them. Not affection, not yet, but understanding. They had failed individually, but maybe together they could rise. From that day forward, something shifted. Team 7 wasn't perfect, not even close. Sasuke still walked ahead of the others, rarely speaking unless necessary. Sakura still sighed when Naruto got too loud or too wild. And Naruto, well, he was still Naruto, messy, eager, bursting with being too big for his little hands. But now they stood beside one another. Their first few missions weren't glamorous. Chasing stray cats, pulling weeds, delivering packages to old shopkeepers who grumbled more than they thanked. But Naruto didn't complain, not really. Because now, when he ran, someone ran beside him. When he slipped, someone turned back. And when he laughed, really laughed, it didn't echo back alone. There was a moment one morning just after sunrise. They had been assigned to repaint an old fence in the outskirts of the village. The task was simple, almost silly. But by midday, Naruto had more paint on his face than on the wood. Sakura rolled her eyes, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Even Sasuke gave a quiet, almost invisible smirk before turning away. And Naruto noticed that smile, that softness. He didn't say anything, but he remembered. Later, when they sat under the shade of a tree eating lunch, Naruto looked around at the 2 figures beside him, one silently chewing rice balls, the other carefully unwrapping her bento. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the extra piece. He felt included, not praised, not doted on, but present, and that was more than enough. Kakashi, too, began to see it. The subtle way, Naruto looked to Sasuke for cues during training. How Sakura started standing a little closer when Naruto struggled with chakra control. How their once separate steps now began to find rhythm. There was a mission, a simple escort where they had to camp overnight in the woods. The fire crackled gently. The stars blinked above like tiny, watching eyes. Naruto sat between the others, poking at the embers with a stick. "Do you think," he asked quietly, "we'll always be a team?" Neither of them answered right away. Sasuke leaned back, eyes on the stars, saying nothing. Sakura hugged her knees and murmured, "I hope so." Naruto nodded and stared into the fire. And for the first time, the silence around him didn't hurt. It felt safe, shared. Like maybe, just maybe, he was no longer the boy on the outside looking in. During training, they sparred often. Naruto was rarely the strongest. Sasuke's technique was sharper, his instincts faster. But Naruto had something different. He didn't stop. He fell, he stumbled, he failed again and again. But he stood back up every time. And though Sasuke rarely said a word, there were moments, brief and wordless, when he'd extend a hand to help Naruto rise. Just once. Just enough. Sakura, too, began to notice the layers beneath Naruto's noise. How hard he tried. How much he cared. There was one day when Naruto twisted his ankle during tree climbing practice. He laughed it off, pretended he was fine. But Sakura walked beside him, the whole way back to the village, not saying much, just matching his limp with her steps. It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't need to be. It was quiet care, the kind Naruto had never known, but was learning how to accept. Bit by bit, Team 7 became more than a list of names. They were a trio of contrasts, light and shadow, silence and chatter, patience and impulsiveness, somehow fitting together like mismatched pieces of a warm, clumsy puzzle. And in the soft spaces between their words, between their missions and meals and messy mistakes, something beautiful grew. Not perfection, but presence. Not loud friendship, but quiet trust. And in Naruto's heart, a corner that had long been hollow began to fill, with footsteps beside his own, with voices that didn't ignore him, with laughter that came from more than one mouth, with the smallest, gentlest seed of belonging. The day came when the missions changed. No more chasing cats, no more weeding gardens or painting fences. This time, it was a C-rank mission. An escort job, simple on the surface. But the road ahead would lead to something far more dangerous. Their client was an old bridge builder named Tazuna. Gruff, skeptical, always frowning under his straw hat. He didn't seem to think much of them, especially Naruto. "Just kids," he muttered. "And noisy ones at that." But Naruto grinned anyway. "We'll protect you. Believe it." They left the gates of Konoha under a soft, gray sky. Mist clung to the forest paths like memory. The air was cool, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes footsteps sound louder than usual. Naruto walked just behind Kakashi, eyes wide, feet eager. Sakura kept to the center, watching everything. Sasuke stayed at the rear, silent and alert. They were a team now, not just in name, but in rhythm. Still, nothing had prepared them for what came next. The first attack happened quickly. Two masked figures burst from the brush fast, coordinated, armed with sickles and poison. Naruto froze. His body wouldn't move. His knees locked. His hands trembled. The enemy was real. The threat was real. And suddenly, the training fields and practice dummies felt very far away. But Sasuke moved. Without hesitation, he intercepted, deflecting blades, protecting the target. Kakashi emerged in a blur and finished the fight in a heartbeat. The attackers were down. And Naruto was still standing there, unharmed, but ashamed. Later, around the fire, the silence was heavy. He stared at his clenched fists, knuckles pale. "I couldn't move," he whispered. No one answered. Even Sakura didn't know what to say. And Sasuke turned away. Naruto stood up suddenly and stormed into the woods. Kakashi found him a while later, sitting on a mossy rock, alone again like before. But something had changed. "I'm not strong enough," Naruto said, staring at the dirt. "They'll never respect me. Not Sasuke. Not anyone." Kakashi watched him quietly. Then he spoke calm and low, like wind through trees. "Strength doesn't mean never being afraid. It means standing up anyway." He placed a small scroll beside Naruto. A simple storage seal, nothing fancy. "Practice this. Learn to rely on more than just guts." Then he turned to leave. Naruto looked down at the scroll, then at his shaking hands, and he whispered to himself, "I won't freeze again." The journey continued, deeper into the land of waves. The mist grew thicker, the roads narrower, and something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't just weather. It was a weight, a warning. Then came the next attack. A sword massive, cleaving through trees like paper slammed down in front of them. From the fog stepped a man in black, bandaged, silent, eyes sharp like winter steel. Zabuza, a rogue ninja, a killer. This time no one froze. Naruto moved. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but bravely. He followed orders, backed up his teammates, guarded Tazuna. And when Kakashi was trapped in water held prisoner in Zabuza's jutsu, it was Naruto and Sasuke who stepped up. Together. Naruto crafted a plan. Sasuke executed it. And for the first time, they moved as one. The strategy worked. Zabuza was forced back. Kakashi was freed. And though the battle wasn't over, something had already been won. Trust. Later that night, Naruto lay beneath a makeshift tent. The stars were hidden behind layers of fog, but he wasn't thinking about the sky. He was thinking about Sasuke, how they had fought side by side. About Sakura, how she had stood firm, guarding Tazuna with trembling hands. About Kakashi, who hadn't just protected them, but had believed in them. He smiled. Not the loud, showy smile he used to wear like armor, but a quiet one, real, small, and full. The silence didn't feel so heavy anymore, because it wasn't empty. It was shared. And in that stillness, Naruto realized something. He wasn't just a teammate now. He was part of something. Part of them? The mist hung low over the bridge like a ghost refusing to leave. Team 7 had returned, their mission not yet over. Zabuza was alive. And beside him stood a boy, silent, graceful, eyes like mirrors. His name was Haku. The next battle came not with loud warnings, but with a hush. A frozen dome of mirrors. A blur of Senbon. A storm of speed and sorrow. Naruto was separated, trapped within Haku's jutsu alongside Sasuke. It was beautiful and terrifying, this strange crystal prison. A world of reflections. Of flying needles. Of pain shared in silence. Naruto fought wildly, recklessly, shouting as he always did, driven not by glory but fear, not for himself, but for Sasuke. And when Sasuke fell body-pierced, breath shallow, something inside Naruto shattered. For a moment he forgot the loneliness, forgot the village, forgot the dream of being Hokage. There was only rage, and grief, and the memory of laughter shared under trees. He screamed, and his chakra erupted wild, red, unfamiliar. The nine-tails stirred just slightly. And in that terrifying moment, the boy who once begged to be seen was finally seen by all. Naruto fought with fury. He broke through Haku's mirrors. And yet, when he saw Haku's face, truly saw it, everything paused. Because Haku wasn't just a weapon. He was someone like Naruto. Someone who had been alone. Someone who had found one person to believe in and lived for them completely. Naruto's fist lowered. His breath slowed. And in that breathless moment, between two broken boys standing in the mist, something wordless passed. Not hatred, but understanding. The battle ended. Zabuza fell. Not to blades, but to sorrow. He chose, in the final seconds of his life, to fall beside Haku, the boy who had given him warmth he'd never deserved. The fog began to lift. And on that half-finished bridge, surrounded by broken stone and fallen dreams, Team 7 stood in silence. Not victorious. Not proud. Just quiet. Later, as they laid Haku and Zabuza side by side, snow began to fall. Soft, slow. A hush from the sky itself. Naruto looked down at their still faces, and something ached in him. Not the same ache of loneliness, but the ache that comes from understanding a story too late. Sakura wiped her eyes. Sasuke stood beside her, arms folded, but gaze heavy. And Kakashi said nothing, just bowed his head. On the journey home, the roads felt longer. But Naruto walked with a new steadiness. He didn't trail behind anymore. He didn't charge ahead. He walked with them, beside them. And at camp, when firelight flickered on tired faces, he didn't fill the silence with noise. He listened. He laughed softly. He offered food without waiting to be asked. At one point, Sakura handed him a water flask. Sasuke passed him a blanket without a word. Kakashi looked over and simply nodded a quiet, well done, without needing to say it. Naruto smiled, because for the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like belonging. When they finally returned to Konoha, the gates greeted them with the creak of memory. The village looked the same, lanterns swinging, rooftops glowing in a late afternoon gold. But Naruto had changed. He stood a little taller, spoke a little softer, felt a little fuller. He had gone beyond the walls with the two near strangers, and returned with something he had never truly had for: friends. They hadn't promised him anything. They hadn't filled the silence with praise. But they had stood beside him in pain, in danger, in stillness. And that was more than he had ever asked for. That night, Naruto lay on his futon, the forehead protector resting beside him. The stars outside blinked gently. A breeze tugged at the window. He closed his eyes. And as sleep pulled him downward like a tide, he whispered softly into the dark, "Thank you for not letting me be alone." And in his dream, there were no long hallways, no empty swings, no ramen bowls for one, only soft footsteps and laughter and voices in the mist, together. There are some silences that feel warm shared between friends, beneath trees, beside fires. And then there are silences that echo, the kind that come just before something breaks. Naruto felt it long before he understood it. It began in small ways. Sasuke pulling away more than usual. Skipping meals, training alone longer than needed. Staring off into the distance as if something or someone was calling to him from beyond the horizon. The missions continued, the village hummed with its usual rhythm. But in the pauses between, Naruto noticed it. A quietness that hadn't been there before. Not the soft quiet of belonging, but the sharp quiet of someone leaving in pieces. One morning, Naruto waited on the rooftop, the same one where they used to meet before assignments. Sakura arrived first, books tucked in her arms, hair blowing slightly in the breeze. But Sasuke was late. Again. Naruto didn't say anything. He just looked down at the tiles and drew shapes with his foot. Kakashi arrived eventually and dismissed them early. "Training's optional today," he said, eyeing Sasuke's empty place without comment. Sakura lingered. Naruto stood still, and the rooftop wind carried nothing but silence. Later that evening, Naruto wandered to the training grounds. There, beneath the trees, he found Sasuke's shirt damp with sweat, eyes hard, fists clenched. His attacks were wild, powerful, unfocused, as if he were fighting something he couldn't reach. Naruto stepped closer. "Sasuke?" But the other boy didn't look at him, just kept moving. Again and again, fists into bark, kunai into air, jutsu into shadows. Naruto didn't ask what was wrong. He knew Sasuke wouldn't answer. Not with words. But he stayed there, watching, waiting, hoping that maybe the silence would pass. It didn't. And then one night, Sasuke was gone. Not missing. Not lost. Just gone. Left behind nothing but a whisper of chakra in the trees and an ache in the heart of the team. Sakura cried at the village gate, begged him not to go. Naruto never even got the chance. When he heard, he didn't speak. Didn't shout. Didn't run around in circles like he used to. He simply stood very still, like someone had taken the sound out of the world. Flashbacks came in pieces. Sasuke beside him on missions, their hands moving in sync during training. The way their rivalry burned like fire, frustrating, bright, real. All those moments replayed slowly in Naruto's mind. Not loud, not sharp, just soft edges and sudden emptiness. He sat beneath the same tree where they'd once shared lunch. Birds flew overhead. Leaves danced in the sunlight. And Naruto said nothing, 'cause there was nothing left to say. He just sat and remembered. Remembered how, little by little, Sasuke had started to smile. How his voice, once cold, had begun to carry quiet warmth. And how it had all slipped away like water between fingers. That night, the village felt quieter than usual. The lanterns still flickered. Shutters still creaked in the breeze. But for Naruto, everything sounded distant, like someone had placed a wall between him and the world. He sat on the windowsill of his small apartment, legs pulled in, head resting against the frame. The night air was cool, brushing against his skin like a forgotten lullaby. And in the hush of that hour, the memories came. Sasuke's first smirk, not mocking, just amused. His rare short nods of approval. The way he would sometimes, without meaning to, walk just a little slower, so Naruto could keep up. They hadn't said it out loud, but Naruto had started to believe it. That maybe Sasuke was his friend, and now that friend had walked away. Naruto turned his gaze to the moon, pale, distant, alone in a sky too large. His throat tightened. He remembered a promise, one he never spoke but felt deep inside. "I'll never let you go too far." But now, Sasuke was already gone. And the silence he left behind? It hurt more than any wound Naruto had ever known. The next morning, the village stirred with uneasy energy. Tsunade had summoned a team young, brave, untested. Naruto was among them. Choji, Neji, Kiba, Shikamaru, Naruto, each carrying their own purpose, their own strength, their own silent fears. But for Naruto, there was only one thought. I have to bring him back. He didn't say it dramatically, didn't shout it from rooftops. He just clenched his fist as they passed through the village gates and whispered, "Wait for me, Sasuke." The journey was hard from the beginning. Enemy after enemy, trap after trap. Each friend peeling away to hold the line, to buy time, to trust Naruto with the one goal. None of them could carry alone. Yet Sasuke. Naruto ran faster than he ever had. Through forests, over rivers, past memories. And every time he stumbled, he saw a flash of their last mission together. A memory of Sasuke, back-turned facing the wind. That image pulled him forward, even as fear crept in. What if Sasuke didn't want to be saved? What if, he never truly belonged in the same story? Naruto shook the thought from his head and kept moving. Because this wasn't just about rivalry, not about proving strength. This was about something far deeper. It was about the first person who made him feel seen. And Naruto refused to let that light vanish into shadow. Finally, in a clearing near the Valley of the End, he found him. Sasuke, alone, waiting. The river rushed behind him. Two giant statues of past heroes loomed over them, silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. Sasuke didn't flinch when Naruto arrived. He simply turned his head slightly, as if he had been expecting him all along. "You came," he said quietly. Naruto didn't respond with anger. He didn't shout. He just looked at him and asked, "Why?" The question held everything. All the nights they trained, all the missions they shared, all the laughter they never admitted mattered. Sasuke didn't answer right away. He only looked down and whispered, "I have to do this, alone." Naruto stepped closer. His voice cracked, not with fury, but something softer. "We were friends." Sasuke's eyes flickered, just for a moment. And then they began to fight. Not as enemies, but as two boys, desperately trying to hold on to something breaking. The sky hung low above the Valley of the End. Clouds drifted slowly, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Beneath those towering statues, the water churned, echoing with something deeper than sound. Naruto stood at one end of the river, Sasuke at the other. Neither moved. Not yet. For a long moment, all that passed between them was silence. Not the cold kind, not distant, but painful, familiar. Naruto took a breath. He remembered the mission reports, the lectures, the logic. Sasuke is a traitor. He's left the village. He's dangerous. But Naruto didn't see a traitor. He saw a boy who once sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, quiet and proud. He saw someone who had smirked when Naruto failed, only to quietly show him how to get it right. He saw a rival, a teammate, a friend, someone he had come to care for like family. Sasuke's voice broke the silence first. "You're wasting your time," he said. "You can't stop me." Naruto didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply replied, "I didn't come to stop you." He stepped forward slowly. "I came to bring you home." Sasuke's hands clenched at his sides, eyes narrowing, something flickering behind them. Sorrow, maybe, or regret. "You don't understand anything." Naruto's voice grew quieter, steadier. "I understand you're hurting." Sasuke looked away. The wind tugged at his cloak. "I'm not the same as you," he said. "You had nothing to lose. I did. And I lost it all. Naruto shook his head slowly. No, you're wrong. He stepped closer again. We both lost something. I lost a childhood, a family, a place in the world. He placed a hand over his heart. But then I found one. The words lingered. For me, Naruto whispered. That was Team 7. Sasuke's breath caught just barely. He turned his head just slightly. And then, the wind changed. The moment snapped. Without warning, chakra flared. Sasuke launched forward fast, fierce, desperate. Their battle began. But it wasn't like the battles Naruto had fought before. This wasn't about victory, not about power. It was about pain. And everything neither of them knew how to say. Each strike carried a memory. Each block, a silent plea. Sasuke's fist against Naruto's shoulder. You don't understand me. Naruto's kunai clashing with his blade. I won't give up on you. The valley lit with lightning, water rising around them in crashing waves. Sasuke's Sharingan spun, cold and precise. Naruto's chakra surged fierce, red-tinted, wild. But even in the chaos, there was sorrow. Two souls caught between memory and desire. Between the boyhood they had shared and the paths now pulling them apart. Naruto landed hard on the river's edge. He looked up, eyes tired, chest heaving. I don't want to fight you, he whispered. Sasuke stood above him, face unreadable. But I will, Naruto added softly, if that's what it takes to keep our bond. The river surged once more, foam and storm all around. In a moment, both boys rose again. Not as enemies, but as two broken halves of the same story, charging toward a future neither could fully see. Rain began to fall. Soft at first, a whisper from the sky. Then heavier, as if even the heavens could feel the weight of what was unfolding below. Naruto and Sasuke stood, facing one another in the heart of the valley. Breathless. Bruised. But not broken. Not yet. Their chakra had flared and faded, their strength stretched thin. And still they kept moving. Naruto lunged again, not with rage, but with hope. With every step he remembered. The rooftop where they first fought. The quiet lunches under the tree. The smirks, the glances, the silence that had slowly become something more. A bond. Fragile. Real. But Sasuke's eyes held a storm. A storm older than Naruto could imagine. Every strike he threw carried the weight of a family lost in blood. A brother's shadow. A hunger that could not be filled within the village walls. Lightning cracked above them, splitting the sky. Their final clash came like a breath held too long. Chidori and Rasengan, two forces born of opposite hearts. They surged forward, chakra spinning, wind and lightning screaming into one another. And then, silence. The valley swallowed the noise. Time paused. When the smoke cleared, they lay side by side, not as rivals, not as enemies, just boys, exhausted, soaked in rain, eyes half open, neither able to move. Naruto turned his head slightly, the ache in his body nothing compared to the ache inside. Sasuke. His voice was faint, barely a whisper carried on the wind. We were friends. Sasuke closed his eyes. A single drop of rain slid down his cheek. Or maybe it was something else. The clouds drifted slowly. Time passed like mist. Sasuke sat up first. His hand hovered near Naruto's. For a moment he didn't speak. Then quietly, more to himself than anyone else, I have to sever this bond. Naruto didn't move. Didn't stop him. He just lay there, eyes on the sky, feeling the space beside him grow colder. Footsteps faded into the distance, one by one, each step pulling a piece of the past with it. And then he was gone. Sasuke had left. Not just the village, but the boy who had chased him to the edge of the world. Naruto returned to Konoha with quiet eyes. There was no victory in his stride, no pride in the bruises on his skin, only a silence that stretched from his chest to the sky above him. Sakura saw him at the gate. Her eyes searched the path behind him once, twice before filling with tears. He shook his head softly, and she understood. No words passed between them. Just grief, just loss, just the sound of wind in the trees. That night, Naruto lay in his room staring at the ceiling. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply remembered Sasuke's face in the morning light, the smirk that meant, "I see you," the rivalry that had once made the loneliness bearable, and then the goodbye that had never been said. Sleep came slowly, and in his dreams they were on the swing set again, side by side, younger, unbroken. The sky was blue. The world was still whole, and neither of them had walked away. In the quiet darkness, Naruto whispered one last promise to himself. I'll bring him back. Not with force, not with fury, but with everything their bond still carried even in pieces. Because bonds don't truly break. They stretch. They ache. They disappear into silence. But sometimes, even silence remembers. Some dreams are loud, shouted from rooftops, declared in front of crowds. But others are whispered. Whispered in the dark when no one is listening. Held quietly in a chest that aches. Lit like a candle, flickering, but never dying. Naruto's dream was still alive. Even after the bruises faded. Even after Sasuke's footsteps disappeared into the mist. Even after the world grew quiet around him. He stood again. He woke up again. He smiled, not the wide, foolish grin of before, but the softer one. The kind born of pain and promise. I'll bring him back, he had said. And he meant it. Not just for the village, not for pride, but for that bond. For the friend who had once filled the silence. The days passed slowly in Konoha. The missions continued. The streets remained familiar. But something inside Naruto had shifted. He still trained, still ate ramen, still spoke loudly at times. But every now and then he'd grow quiet. He'd stand at the top of the Hokage monument at the sunset, hands in his pockets, eyes far away, watching the horizon, as if waiting for a silhouette to return, as if still hoping. And he did hope, because he wasn't done. He wasn't giving up. Then one morning, Tsunade called him in. Her gaze was steady, her tone calm. Jiraiya has offered to take you, she said, for training, for growth, for time away from this village. Naruto blinked. A part of him wanted to refuse to stay, to wait. But deep down he knew, if he was ever going to bring Sasuke back, he had to become stronger. Not just with jutsu, but with heart. He nodded. And just like that, the path ahead shifted once more. Jiraiya wasn't like Kakashi. Where Kakashi was reserved, Jiraiya was loud. Where Kakashi taught with subtlety, Jiraiya challenged everything. Their journey began not with fanfare, but with footsteps, leaving the village behind, bags packed, sky wide and blue. Naruto turned once before crossing the gates. He looked at the rooftops, the academy building, the swing set beneath that old tree, and he whispered, I'll come back stronger. Then he walked on. The road ahead was long. They moved through villages and forests, valleys and rivers. The days were filled with travel, the nights with a quiet firelight. Naruto trained constantly. Shadow clones in the rain. Chakra control under waterfalls. Meditation in the stillness of ancient temples. It wasn't easy. Nothing ever was. But he didn't complain. Because every bruise reminded him why he had started. Because every time he fell, a voice inside said, Sasuke wouldn't stop, so I won't either. Sometimes Jiraiya would watch him from a distance. He wouldn't speak, just observe the way Naruto poured his heart into every motion, every seal, every attempt. And he'd smile softly. He really won't give up, he would say to himself. And he was right. Because Naruto's story had never been about talent. It was about will, about standing again. Even when the world gives you every reason to lie down. One evening they camped beneath a wide, open sky. The stars blinked like tiny hopes across the black canvas above. Naruto sat beside the fire, his hands resting on his knees. Jiraiya looked over. You're quiet tonight. Naruto didn't answer right away. Then he said gently, I was just thinking about him. Jiraiya nodded. Sasuke? Naruto gave a small nod. I still see him, he said. In my dreams. In the way the wind moves sometimes. In the quiet. He looked up. And I'm going to bring him back, no matter how long it takes. Jiraiya didn't laugh. Didn't scold. He just placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, Then we'll start again tomorrow. The road curved endlessly ahead. Forests gave way to winding mountain trails. Dusty paths turned to narrow bridges stretched across ancient rivers. Sometimes they traveled through peaceful villages. Sometimes they wandered into ruins where silence lived. Naruto's journey wasn't just physical. It was becoming a quiet transformation. Each day taught him something new, not always about jutsu, but about patience, rhythm, stillness. Jiraiya, for all his eccentricity, understood something most didn't. That strength wasn't only in fists or fire. It lived in restraint, in breath, in learning when to speak and when to simply listen. So Naruto listened. He listened to the way the trees rustled before rain, to the quiet grief behind a stranger's smile, to the unspoken wisdom of the world around him. They once stayed in a remote fishing town where sea mist wrapped the docks like memory. Naruto helped an old man repair a leaking roof. The man didn't ask for his name. He simply handed him nails and a smile. That night, as waves kissed the shore, Naruto sat alone, watching the moon float across water. He thought of Sasuke, of how quiet he had become near the end, of the way he never asked for help even when the weight was too much. Naruto sighed, a kind of sigh that comes from knowing someone too well and missing them anyway. In the soft hush of the tide, he whispered, I'll find you, no matter how far the ocean stretches. There were battles, yes, small ones. Bandits, rogue ninja, creatures twisted by greed. But each encounter left Naruto thinking less about winning and more about why people stray. He began to see reflections of Sasuke and others. A warrior who had lost his village. A child who had buried his parents under moonlight. A shinobi who chased strength just to silence his sorrow. And every time, Naruto didn't just fight, he understood. He began to realize that pain didn't make people evil. It made them lonely. And in that loneliness, they made choices they couldn't take back. Jiraiya noticed the change. Naruto still had fire. Still stumbled over seals. Still still argued with frogs during training. But something was maturing inside him. His chakra flowed smoother. His reactions became quieter. Even his laugh had softened, less sharp, more real. They traveled next to a desert village where wind sang through broken stone. There, Naruto trained under the stars. Summoning jutsu, chakra control, breath work. He stumbled, he shouted, he fell. But then he stood again. Always stood again. One night, Jiraiya said, "You remind me of your father." Naruto looked up wide-eyed, and Jiraiya added gently, "But you carry your mother's fire." Naruto didn't know what to say, so he just smiled and looked down at his hands. "I'm still just me," he said. "But I want to be the kind of person they'd be proud of." Jiraiya didn't reply. He only nodded and tossed him another training scroll. Then we keep going. Some mornings, Naruto would wake before the sun. He'd sit by riverside camps or on cold stone steps of forgotten temples, hands in his lap, eyes closed. He wasn't meditating to gain power. He was searching for clarity, for direction, for Sasuke. Even though their paths had split, Naruto believed their stories were still connected, like two rivers moving apart, only to meet again farther down the valley. Sometimes that belief was the only thing that kept him moving forward. In one forest town, a child asked him, "Are you a hero?" Naruto paused, smiled but softly. "No," he said. "Just someone who doesn't give up." The child blinked, confused. "Why not?" Naruto looked out toward the setting sun. "Because if I stop, maybe someone else will too." He didn't say Sasuke's name. He didn't need to. The wind carried it anyway. Time passed like wind through the tall grass, not loud but constant. Seasons changed. Naruto and Jiraiya wandered through spring rains, summer heat, autumn leaves, and winter frost. And with each passing month, Naruto grew, not just taller, not just faster, but quieter too. He laughed less to fill the silence, because now he was learning to live inside it. He no longer feared pauses in conversation. He no longer chased noise to hide the ache. Instead, he began to find peace in the in-between moments. The smell of wet earth after rain. The first bite of warm food on a cold night. The rustling of leaves while walking a road with no map. He was learning the kind of strength that doesn't shout. The kind that endures. There were temples in the mountains. Old places. Places forgotten by most, but remembered by time. Jiraiya brought him there for meditation. The monks didn't speak often, and neither did Naruto. At first, he fished, stared at birds, yawned loudly. But slowly, something shifted. He began to notice his breath, how it moved in and out like a tide, how thoughts rose and fell like clouds, how grief came like a wave and left the same way. He sat longer each day, eyes closed, not thinking of Sasuke to chase him, but feeling him, gently, silently, noticing how his memory lived not only in sorrow, but also in stillness. Later, they traveled to a village where the children followed Naruto everywhere. They didn't know who he was, only that he was kind, that he listened, that he smiled when they tugged his sleeve. One girl gave him a folded paper star. "It's for your friend," she said, "so they don't feel alone." Naruto held it in his palm a long time. That night, by the campfire, he placed it carefully in his travel pouch between two scrolls and a worn-out photo of Team 7. Jiraiya saw but didn't say anything. Some things don't need to be explained. Training grew more intense. Summoning, chakra flow, internal control. But Naruto welcomed the challenge now. Not out of anger, not out of desperation, but because he had learned that growth comes in small steps, and pain is part of the path. He no longer screamed when frustrated. He just tried again, and again, and again. His hands moved more confidently, his footwork lighter, his energy clearer. But perhaps the biggest change was in his eyes. They no longer searched every face for approval. They simply looked forward. One dusk, Jiraiya said, "You're ready to go back soon." Naruto blinked. "Back to Konoha?" Jiraiya nodded. "You've learned a lot. Enough to begin again?" Naruto looked toward the horizon. Konoha felt distant, not just in miles, but in memory. And yet, he missed it. The swing, the ramen stand, Sakura's voice, Kakashi's eye, and Sasuke. Always Sasuke. Naruto smiled faintly. "Will I be strong enough to bring him back?" Jiraiya didn't answer directly. He reached into his pocket and tossed Naruto a scroll. "You'd become someone who doesn't ask that anymore." Naruto looked at the scroll and then at Jiraiya. And for the first time, he felt it fully. He wasn't chasing shadows anymore. He was walking toward them with light in his hands. That night, beneath a sky full of stars, Naruto lay awake. The grass was soft beneath his back. The wind brushed against his cheeks like a mother's hand. He closed his eyes and whispered into the dark, "I am coming, Sasuke." Not as a boy filled with rage, not as a rival filled with pride, but as a friend who never gave up. And somewhere far away in a place he could not yet reach, that bond stirred. Still distant, still broken, but not gone, never gone. Morning broke gently. Golden light poured through the trees, stretching across the forest floor where dew still clung to leaves like tiny stars that had fallen in the night. Naruto stirred awake, the fire beside him long since cooled. But in his chest, something still burned, a quiet, steady flame that no storm had managed to extinguish. Today was the day they would head back to Konoha, back to everything he had left behind, and everything he still hoped to find. Jiraiya packed in silence. Naruto did too. There was no rush, no grand farewell to the wild places they had passed through. Only stillness, the kind that comes when something inside has settled, even if the journey isn't over. They began to walk. Birdsong filled the spaces between footfalls. Wind danced through the trees, whispering songs only the leaves could understand. Naruto looked ahead, not down, not back. And in his eyes lived something deeper than strength. Purpose. As the village came into view, a hush passed over him. The gates stood tall and familiar. The streets stretched quietly beyond. For a moment, he was just a boy again. The same one who once sat on a swing alone. The one no one looked at. The one who chased smiles like they were fallen stars. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He was still Naruto, loud at times, messy, full of heart. But now there was calm beneath the energy, stillness beneath the fire. He walked into Konoha not as someone returning, but as someone beginning again. Faces turned as he passed. Some recognized him. Some didn't. But there was something about him now, something gentler in his gaze, something stronger in the way he carried himself. He made his way to the old swing, now worn and faded by time. And he stood there a while, just watching the wind move through the branches above. Children ran past behind him, laughing. The village lived on. Naruto closed his eyes, and in that moment, he felt it. Sasuke, Still gone, still far. But the bond, it hadn't disappeared. It hadn't broken. It had simply gone quiet, like a song paused, waiting for the right note to return. Later that night, Naruto sat on his rooftop, legs dangling, arms behind his head. The stars looked the same, but he didn't. Jiraiya sat beside him, slurping noodles from a travel bowl. Neither of them said much, until Naruto broke the silence with a soft voice. "Do you think he remembers me?" Jiraiya didn't answer at first. He just looked up at the stars, then back down at Naruto's face, no longer full of boyish defiance, but of hope tempered by time. Finally, he said, "I think some bonds can't be forgotten, even when we want to." Naruto nodded slowly, then smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because he still believed it could be. And belief, in the end, was his real strength. Not his jutsu, not his chakra, but his heart. The unshakable, stubborn heart of a boy who once had nothing and decided to fight for everything. As sleep drifted toward him, Naruto leaned back and looked to the moon. He didn't whisper anything that night. No dramatic vow, no quiet promise, just breath and stillness and peace. Because some nights aren't about reaching. Some are simply about resting before the journey continues. And Naruto wasn't done yet. Not even close. There was once a boy who carried the weight of a village's silence. He walked alone through the crowded streets, sat on an empty swing, and smiled a little louder just to drown the ache. But time is kind in quiet ways. It does not shout when change arrives. It simply slips in through mornings, through breath, through footsteps that slowly grow steadier. And so the boy who once held no name became someone who could hold the light, even in war. The battlefield was vast, endless plains dusted with the weight of conflict, sky stretching wide over headbands and history, whispers of fear, courage, and memories scattered like fallen leaves. But through it all, Naruto stood still, not with arrogance, not with vengeance, but with peace quietly blooming inside him, because he no longer fought just to be seen. He no longer chased acknowledgement like a desperate flame. He had been seen. He had been felt. He had been accepted. By them. By all of them. Even those who once turned away. And that quiet acceptance, it changed everything. There was a moment between the chaos, when Naruto stood at the heart of the allied shinobi forces, surrounded not by shadows, but by people. Hundreds of them. Different clans. Different lands. Different pasts. And they looked at him not as a stranger, not as a container, but as a comrade, as Naruto. That moment didn't roar. It hummed soft and steady, like the sun rising after a long, sleepless night. Naruto closed his eyes and felt it. A stillness, a warmth, a belonging. He remembered the first time someone called his name with love behind it. Kakashi, Iruka, Jiraiya, Hinata, Tsunade, Gaara. One by one, their voices echoed inside him. Not as shouts, but as candles, each flame lighting the dark corners of his heart. Naruto was no longer trying to prove his worth. He was simply living it, with every breath, with every step. Even on a battlefield, there was space for calm. Even in war, peace was something he carried inside. When Kurama the Nine-Tails finally trusted him, it didn't come as a burst. It came gently, a slow surrender, a soft sigh. And in that moment, something inside Naruto shifted forever. The beast that once raged in his chest now stood beside him. No longer a curse, but a companion, a friend. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Because some connections aren't made through words. They are made through shared silence, through long suffering, through the promise that says, you are not alone anymore. And so Naruto stood golden light pulsing from his body, like a morning sun breaking through storm clouds. He moved not with force, but with clarity, helping, shielding, healing, not because he had to, but because it was who he had become. The boy who once needed saving, now saved others. The boy who once longed for hands to reach for him, now reached for everyone, even enemies, even the lost, even those who had found their own light. In the quiet moments between battles, he sat with the wounded. He handed food to tired comrades, laughed gently when someone teased him, carried those too weak to walk. He was no longer just a shinobi. He was hope, wrapped in orange, a light walking through dust and doubt. And the world noticed, not with cheers, not with songs, but with softer things, a hand on his shoulder, a nod from a rival, a silent tear from an elder who once doubted him. It was enough, more than enough. There are kinds of strength that do not make sound. The strength to forgive, to believe, to carry pain without letting it harden you. And Naruto had become that kind of strong, not the kind who conquered, but the kind who understood. In the middle of the fourth great ninja war, the nights grew long and heavy. Tents glowed dimly under the moonlight. Wounded shinobi whispered in sleep while the wind rustled softly through the trees above. Naruto would walk the edges of camp, not as a leader issuing orders, but as a quiet presence, steady, watchful, kind. He offered warmth in small ways, a hand on a trembling shoulder, a moment of laughter with a weary Yanin, a gentle nod to those who had lost too much to speak. And slowly, people began to draw near, not just because of his power, but because his calm was contagious, because his smile, tired but real, reminded them of home. Gaara once sat beside him under a tree, about quiet for a moment. They didn't speak of death, or tactics, or pain. They just watched the stars. And after a long silence, Gaara said, "You never stopped believing, even in me." Naruto looked at him, then smiled softly. "I didn't have a reason to. I just didn't know how to give up." Gaara closed his eyes and let the stillness settle. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is your quiet faith. There was a moment when Naruto shielded a battalion from an overwhelming attack. He stood in front of hundreds, arms open, chakra glowing like sunrise through fog. And when the dust cleared, he was still standing, eyes steady, hands trembling, but spirit whole. The show behind him didn't cheer. They didn't cry. They just looked at him with something new in their eyes. Trust. Deep, unspoken, unbreakable. As dawn broke over another blood-stained field, Naruto stood alone on a ridge. Below him, medics tended to the fallen. Far off, banners fluttered in the wind. But in that quiet pocket of time, there was no battle, just breath, just sky, just Naruto watching the light grow. And in that golden hour, Kurama's voice rumbled gently inside him. "You've changed." Naruto didn't respond right away. He closed his eyes and let the wind pass through his hair. Then he said almost to himself, I just started listening, instead of fighting everything. Kurama was quiet, but not distant. There was peace between them now, like fire and air finally learning how to dance. In the days that followed, Naruto moved like light between shadows. He encouraged those on the verge of quitting. He reminded others that peace was not a dream, but a direction. He fought when he had to, but always with care. Every step he took was no longer about proving himself. It was about protecting the world he once thought didn't want him. Because now it did. Now it called his name not in mockery, but in gratitude. And that sound, that soft, collective breath of hope, meant more than any title ever could. At one point, Hinata reached for his hand in the middle of a march through heavy rain. She didn't speak. She didn't ask. She simply held on. Naruto glanced at her, and for a moment the rain didn't matter. He squeezed her hand gently, because sometimes words are too loud. And what we need is touch, reassurance, closeness. The warmth of knowing someone is walking beside you, no matter how long the road ahead may be. There were still battles, still darkness. But Naruto's light didn't flicker anymore. It pulsed, quiet, steady, enduring. Because his greatest power was never the Rasengan. It was his heart. The same heart that refused to let go of Sasuke. That chose to forgive even the unforgivable. That kept shining even when the world went dim. And that was what saved them all. And then he saw him again. Sasuke, standing beneath a broken sky, eyes like winter distant, sharp and silent. They had come full circle. Two boys once separated by pain, now reunited by fate. Not as friends. Not yet. But not as strangers either. Something unspoken lingered in the space between them. A memory, a bond, a question that had waited too long to be answered. Naruto didn't clench his fists. He didn't shout. He simply looked at Sasuke and took a breath. I never stopped, he said softly. Not for a single day. Sasuke's expression didn't change. But the silence around him did. It slowed, as if the world itself was listening. They fought, not out of hate, but out of truth. Fists met fists, eyes locked. But underneath the blows was something deeper than anger, something gentler than revenge. It was grief, loneliness, years of silence finally breaking open like thunderclouds. And when the dust settled, they lay side by side again, like before. Just two boys beneath a sky that had seen everything. Bloodied, breathing, alive. Sasuke looked up, the sky blurring in his vision. Why won't you just give up on me? Naruto closed his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper. Because I was you, once. And with those words, something cracked open. Not loudly, not like a scream, but like a door, long locked, creaking gently in the wind. Sasuke didn't fly, but he didn't move away either. Sometimes, stillness as more than surrender. They returned to the village together, not with parades, not with ceremony. Just slow footsteps through quiet gates. Some villagers watched with wide eyes. Some whispered. Some looked away. But Naruto didn't care, because he knew something they didn't. That healing doesn't need applause. It only needs time, and quiet, and forgiveness. In the months that followed, peace began to settle like morning dew. Slow, gentle, persistent. Naruto helped rebuild homes, listened to stories of the fallen, laughed with children under blooming trees. He wore no crown, no armor, just his old jacket. That quiet smile, the one that meant, I'm still here. On one such morning, as cherry blossoms danced in the breeze, Iruka found him watching the village from a rooftop. Naruto didn't turn around. He just said softly, It's different now. Iruka sat beside him. Because of you, he said. Naruto shook his head gently. No, because of everyone who believed, even when I didn't. Iruka didn't argue. He simply placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder the way he once had long ago when Naruto was still a boy too loud for his own sadness. And they sat there beneath a sky that finally felt kind. That night, Naruto stood alone beneath the Hokage monument. He looked up at the stone faces past heroes, past dreams, and whispered, I'll protect this place with everything I have. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't need to, because the village was quiet, listening, because the wind carried his voice where it needed to go, to the past, to the lost, to the boy I used to be. And all of them whispered back silently, We see you now. The village breathed gently again. No sirens, no shadows, just wind through trees, and laughter echoing down the stone-paved streets. The world had changed, but it hadn't forgotten. There were still scars on the land, in memories. But they were softer now, faded with time, held with grace. And at the heart of it all was Naruto. Not chasing anything now, just living, fully, quietly, completely. He walked through the markets with a soft smile. Vendors greeted him not with awe, but with affection. Children waved as they passed, some tugging his sleeve just to say thank you. Not because he was powerful, but because he had stayed. Through everything. Naruto had become the kind of person people leaned toward, not because he demanded attention, but because his presence felt like home. A campfire in winter, a steady hand in fog. The kind of warmth you don't notice until the cold is gone. He visited old places sometimes. The swing under the tree, the empty training fields, the quiet rooftop where he once watched the stars alone. He didn't go to remember pain. He went to feel the distance between who he was and who he had become. And every time, he stood there a little longer, not in sadness, but in peace, because he had made it, not just through battle, but through himself. One morning, the sky was soft with golden clouds, and birds sang like they'd never known sorrow. Naruto stood in front of the Hokage office, now wearing the robe, now carrying the name, Seventh Hokage. The boy who had once been ignored, now watched over everyone. He didn't enter with pride. He didn't raise his voice. He simply opened the door, bowed his head gently, and took his seat. Outside, the village kept moving. Children laughed. Shinobi trained. Leaves whispered. Naruto looked out through the wide window. And for a long while, he said nothing. Just sat, still, breathing, listening. Because for the first time in his life, everything was quiet, and he wasn't afraid of that silence anymore. That evening, he walked alone to the top of the Hokage monument. The village stretched beneath him, rooftops glowing amber in the last light of day. The air was cool. The sky was opening. He sat at the edge, robe fluttering gently around him, eyes watching as shadows folded into dusk. Sakura had visited earlier with a packed meal. Kakashi had left a note short, dry but full of affection. Even Sasuke had written, Just a few words, but enough to say, "I see you." And Naruto smiled. Because in the end, that's all he had ever wanted. Not power, not fame, just to be seen. And to be loved anyway. As night passed and the horizon softened, a pale light bloomed behind the mountains. Dawn. He sat quietly. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a man watching the sun rise on a world he once only dreamed of belonging to. And as the first ray of light kissed the village, Naruto closed his eyes, not to escape, but to rest, because peace had finally arrived, not just in the world, but in him. The boy who once sat alone now sat with everyone. And the swing, the silence, the sorrow had all become part of the sunrise, a light beyond the shadow.